a lot of motivation, well, yeah, I'd say 90% at least in my case, stems from actually being driven by the strength of your desire to reach that outcome. And that in essence is going to outweigh any sort of effort that you invest that's undirected. As long as there's a reason, even if that reason is just something as simple as necessity or survival, you have a far better chance of reaching your outcome than simply doing something because it's expected of you without really having in mind what you hope to gain from it.
People define love as sex, and that's not how it is.
My brain was capturing this for the last time so that when it goes off,
I respect myself,
So my mom single-handedly raised me. So
it's not all about the emotions. The emotions, you are having them
right now. It's also because we're competing, especially the system of
Love, uthando.
I believe I've seen God personally touching me.
They don't really mean sorry.
Realize how much you are worth and stop chasing the cheap hookups.
Like, I had a very positive mindset to say, you know what?
If you continuously say I'm tired, eventually you're going to be tired.
They are not true to themselves. Old
teenagers that actually know what they want to do.
You want to be a millionaire, you really need to chill with the millionaires.
People actually want to sell what?
Or a sweet or a something to.
Nice. I'm grateful for the life that I've gotten to live up until this point.
Tomorrow you wake up and you start reading.
You can lead anyone or anything.
So you see this graph, ne?
It's the SEC 15, which is our colon clean.
Looking at myself in the way God sees me, and that's
what I will tell you. I lost that 150,000.
How much are you getting paid for this? And I'm like, nothing.
Then 2017, I went into depression.
As your fat and sits, right?
All right, people, let me welcome you on the new episode of As Vegas Explorer. Today, our guest is Gehard van Staden. So, brother, let me welcome you on our show. Thank you so much for showing up. I'm looking forward to exhaust this honor and privilege. I just like how we met, and to see us at this level, I am so happy. How's it, man?
Yeah, it's going pretty well. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And today with our conversation, we're looking at the mindset and beliefs and money acumen. I really want us to jump right straight on the mindset. Mm-hmm. And just before we get to the main to the core of the conversation, I wish you take us back, like on during your childhood when you're growing up. What are some of the things that you really found them challenging for you, and that probably challenged your self-esteem, which had somehow delayed your progress as a child?
With my childhood, I'm very lucky in the sense that I grew up with a mom that had studied child psychology. So she knew kind of all the ways to kind of all the little hacks to get someone to progress as fast as possible. So as a result, I could read by the time I was 4 years old. And I really, to this day, I'm an avid reader. I love to read. However, and this is very funny when you consider what happened to me in the latter part of my life, I had a big problem with things like hand-eye coordination, playing sports. I was not as strong as the other kids in my age group. And as a result, I was picked on a lot because I was a bookworm. And later on, when my parents unfortunately divorced, it became worse off because, now it's a single mom raising a son. We went through a period where financially it was really bad. It was really stressful. So now I'm a poor kid and I'm a bookworm and I'm very much a nerd. I used to like things like Lord of the Rings and comic books way before Marvel and way before it became cool and the norm. I was that strange kid in class who, if everybody had finished their work, instead of sitting and talking, I was the one sitting in the corner reading a book, pulling a big ass book from my bookcase. So that definitely had an effect, but that's ironic because something happened to me during high school where it's difficult to explain. I went from not being interested in sport to loving rugby all of a sudden and deciding I wanted to pursue rugby as a professional career. Unfortunately, well, it didn't quite work out, but I did get to a higher level. For a year or two, I played Curry Cup for Bualand until I broke my shoulder. But yeah, that was the biggest thing I would say when I was younger, not being as physically strong. But yeah, adversity breeds perseverance, and that will link up a little bit later to the mindset that I have and how we handle things that are outside of our control.
Like, let's get to the point where, like, the point of being poor. How can you explain for us, like, how did it look like at that time, like your state of poverty or being poor?
It was quite serious. I'm not going to get into the exact specifics about why my parents split, but at the time, my father was a dominee, a reverend in a very small town, where about 5,000 people, right? And in small towns, dominees are like celebrities. Everybody knows their business. Everybody watches them like hawks. Everybody asks their opinion on everything, and it was quite a scandal. And a lot of the blame was placed very unfairly on my mom. So as a result, there was no way we could stay in the town where we were at. As I said, she studied child psychology, but she was actually a teacher. She quit her job, departmental job, and she started working for a friend, and we moved to Gauteng. At that point, the friend had just started a business, but she paid her so poorly that we couldn't afford to live by ourselves. We actually had to live with them in their house, which created all sorts of problems on its own. So the first opportunity my mom could, she got us out of there and got us into a little apartment. But I remember things being, at this point, I was 10, 11 years old. I remember things being very tight financially. Like there were a couple of months where my mom had to beg our local church to help her out with rent, or we were going to end up on the street. When I was about 12 years old and I just started growing, teenage boys being hungry all the time, where I had stolen a can of creamed corn, and I got a big hiding for that, because now I'm literally stealing food from my brother and sister as well. So it was quite bad. It got a lot better once my mom started working back in the school system again, and she got a permanent governmental position at a local primary school. Then things kind of stabilized. But for a while there, it was pretty close to the poverty line. Yeah.
Well, for me, it really sounds like it was a straight poverty, and I want to get now into the piece of like your mental response to such situations. You speak about being picked on at school and being a nerd, which is like it's not welcomed by our society. Like the fact that you read so much, I don't know what's wrong with that. But especially as you're a child, it's not so much welcome, and the poverty as well. Like, when do you then, or how do you then retaliate to these problems in a sense that help you to progress, as a child? Because I just want to get to this type of analogy. Mm-hmm. I remember at the age of 14 to 17, that period was a period for me to make good decisions. Had I not taken good decisions at that time, I think my life at this moment would be very different and would be so unpreferable on my side. you know. So I want to come to that point. When, like, how do you then retaliate to these problems in a sense of helping you to progress and to become the best dad that you are today, the best business person that you are within your own capacity? How did you retaliate to those problems?
Well, there's the way I responded back at that point, and there's the way I respond to things now. Because at this point, I'm still a very odd person. You know, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'm quite different from usual people, and that's something that you're going to keep on hearing throughout this conversation. There's a poem by Robert Frost, very famous poem, that says, "Two roads diverged into the forest, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference." That's been pretty much my life. And whenever society tends to go this way on something, I tend to take the other road. And it's led me to some incredible places, some also very fulfilling adventures, you know. So at that point, the way I handled it was kind of by retreating into my own little fantasy world and escaping in books, and just I'll be by myself. I'll do my own thing. And I decided, you know what, some other kids are stupid. They're concerned with stupid things. I'm not going to be concerned with stupid things. So what I could do is I could excel academically because I loved reading, and because I knew, this is going to sound very arrogant, but I knew from a very young age that I was above average intelligence. So I made use of that, you know. Let's get ahead as much as possible, and that also became a way that I could alleviate the financial burden on my mom, because if I worked hard, I could get scholarships and bursaries. You know, that's also how I went to university. I got a rugby scholarship. Later on, as I grew a little bit older during high school, the other ways I dealt with it is, as soon as I got interested in rugby, and I decided to see how far I could take it, I, of course, also started entering the gym and becoming big and buff. And what also helped a lot is I went through a massive growth spurt. And I went from average height to being one of the tallest boys at the start of high school. Unfortunately, the growth spurt did not keep up. I topped out at 1.93 meters. It would have been nice if I hit 2. But so if you look at photos of me in the first year of high school, I'm this extremely skinny, nerdy looking kid, while at the end of high school, I'm this gigantic muscle man. I think I gained 35 or 40 kilograms just muscle in that time. I grew about 4 centimeters in high school. Growth spurt happened a little earlier. So yeah, that also set the standard, you know, the way that you can use the gym and exercise to better yourself. But another thing that you'll keep on hearing is I learn as I go along. I change things as I go along. And it's very unfortunate that we can't go back, specifically in my fitness journey. Because if I had to start training from scratch as a 16-year-old now, the way I would do things would be completely different to back then.
I see. And for some people, there are people that are stuck in the process of achieving their goals because they're still using the old techniques of things. When do you realize that you have to change? Was it an environmental change that made you to want to change, or was it like, what was it exactly? When, like, did you get confidence?
As I said, after school, I got a scholarship to go and study in the Cape and to play Currie Cup for Boland. With the aim, I was thinking, like, okay, if I can just do well enough for Boland, I'll be drafted into Viapia, and then from there it's the Stormers, and then, oh my gosh, who knows what happens? You know, maybe the Springboks are waiting for me. And then in my second year, I broke my shoulder, and unfortunately, the girl that I was dating at this point, that's when she realized, she revealed that actually she didn't really love me. She just loved the idea of dating a professional rugby player. So my career ended,
I'm
and my
sorry, man.
relationship ended. There goes my scholarship. So I had to return to Gauteng, and for a long time, I was very lost. Things were not working. I tried to do the things that modern society will tell you, will work, like modern hookup culture, and immersing yourself on social media, Facebook and all those things, and none of it worked. None of it made me feel better, and I kind of regressed. I became a much worse person than I did. What saved me in that instance was meeting the woman who I would eventually marry, and this is a piece of advice I would give to young men: to value yourself and realize how much you are worth, and stop chasing the cheap hookups, and to become the best version possible of yourself, so that you can attract a woman who can help you become even better. Women have this very strange gift of amplifying what's inside a man. Like, if a man is bad, she will make him worse. If a man's good, she'll make him excellent. So my wife had a definite impact on me in that sense. But it was also realizing that the way that I was doing things was not working, and doing them a different way. It really led me to shaping some life philosophies. My general advice to people who are stuck right now and who are not sure of the road ahead is to look around you and find meaning in responsibility. What is the heaviest burden that you can realistically pick up and carry at this moment? Because our world is crying out for strong men at this point. Men who are willing to grow up, men who are willing to lead society forward. And unfortunately, masculinity itself is very much under attack at this stage. You keep hearing words like toxic masculinity, and men are to blame for gender-based violence and all that. And I would argue against that and say there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. There's a weak man and there's a strong man. And by weak and strong, I don't mean physically, or I just mean that weak men cannot control their impulses. A weak man will see a woman and decide, oh, I'm going to rape her. A strong man will know, rather protect her. It's much more difficult to be a strong man. And our society is falling apart because men are being coddled, and men are being told that you're useless, or you need to stay a little boy forever. You shouldn't grow up. We've got a society of Peter Pans, the eternal boys, the boys who never grow up, because we keep on being told that we do not need to take responsibility, that responsibility is bad, whereas responsibility is actually the thing that will give your life meaning. Now, what responsibility will look like to you will differ very much on where you are right now. Responsibility could be actually staying with the woman that you impregnated and being a father to your child, or it could be organizing a neighborhood watch, making sure that your neighborhood is safer, or it can be cleaning up the park next to your house. It can be any of 100 things. So I'll say again, pick the heaviest burden of responsibility that you can handle and do that, even if it's something very small. If you do that every single day, over time, you'll get stronger, and the responsibility will get bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah.
I like that so much, man. And now I want to come to the book that you have read that have transformed your life tremendously. What do you have any book that you have read that have really drifted your mind? And what is it?
There's a couple, but I would say
go through them.
Okay, the biggest three. The one is not so much a book; it's more a collective teachings. It's by a man called Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a psychologist who was in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. And he developed a personality theory, which basically divides people into two groups: those with an internal locus of controls and those with an external locus of controls. Those with an internal locus of controls think to themselves, how can I handle the situation? How can I change the situation to the betterment of me? So they are the biggest determinants in their lives, whether they will be a success or not. People with a strong religious foundation tend to have an internal locus of controls. And it's one of the reasons why if you are really confused in life, I would say, become a little bit religious until you find that foundation again. The people with an external locus of controls, something external to blame their problems on. I don't know if you've ever read or seen the play Raisin in the Sun by, I think her name is Lauren Hainsbridge. I recently watched it again. That's why I'm thinking of it. It was written in the 1950s. It was the first play by a Black woman to be performed on Broadway, actually by a Black person as a whole. But it's about a Black family in Chicago during the years of segregation and their struggles. But one of the strongest characters in the book is the grandmother. And she's got this very strong internal locus of controls that anything that comes her way, she will be able to handle. She'll be able to deal with it. And then you compare that to her son, who has an external locus of controls, where everything else is at fault. I can't succeed in life because no one will give me a chance. We will never move ahead as society because people are oppressing me. Looking for all kinds of excuses, and you can relate this. I'm sure you know people like this in your own life. It's never my fault. It's always because of something else. If I had a traffic accident, it's not because I was texting. It's because the robot wasn't working. So you can get this in small things and much bigger societal issues as well. I don't want to go too much into it, but let's take our weak politicians at this point, where after 30 years of being in control of a country, they can still point and say, "Okay, Eskom is apartheid's fault," instead of saying, "But I've been in charge for 30 years. It's my responsibility." Viktor Frankl is the first one. The second one is a book that I would highly recommend to everyone. It's called The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was a Russian author. And it links up with that internal and external locus of controls. Alexander Solzhenitsyn was a Russian soldier during the Second World War. He was taken captive by Nazi Germany. And at this point, the Russians did not want to sign the Geneva Convention, which states how you are allowed to treat prisoners of war. And because the Russian government wouldn't sign this thing, the Germans were free to abuse Russian prisoners as much as they wanted. In fact, Alexander says it was so bad in the prison camp where he was that when United States captured soldiers, marched past their camps, they would throw food to the Russian captives. That's how bad things were. Right. After the war, he grew up in Soviet Russia, or not grew up. He lived in Soviet Russia, and he was one of the people that was arrested and sent to the gulags under Stalin. While he was in the gulag, he had the most incredible thought, and this is what makes him such a special person. If anyone else, including myself, if I had been taken captive in a situation like that, I would probably, rail against the government and like, "Oh, Stalin, you dictator, how dare you do this to me?" while Alexander was in his cell, he started thinking, what did I do to get here? How is this my fault? And that single realization, that led him to write the Gulag Archipelago. Now it's extra impressive how he wrote it, because he wrote the book inside his head and he memorized it. And only later on, when he got access to toilet paper, he managed to write down the book, and it was smuggled to the West. So what he realized was, when they came for him, the night where they arrested him, they arrested about 10,000 people. Now, if those 10,000 people had just said, no, I'm not going, or had started fighting back, they very easily could have overpowered the 500 soldiers that arrested them. But each one was too afraid to do it. They just went along with the status quo. Say, well, that is my fault. That's my responsibility. That's on all of us.
Oh man, yeah.
That book and the incident at Chernobyl, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but if you're not, definitely watch the Chernobyl TV series. It's pretty accurate for the most part as to what happened with the nuclear disaster. But those two things together exposed the Soviet Union to such an extent that it collapsed in 1991. So Alexander Solzhenitsyn, by taking responsibility for himself, managed to collapse an entire totalitarian regime. That's the second book. The third one is a book called Ordinary Men. I forget what the author is called, but Ordinary Men details a Polish police battalion, also in World War II, or a police battalion that was sent to Poland in World War II. These were blue-collar jobs. Most of the men were in their 40s and 50s. In other words, they were too old to be soldiers, so they were trained as police officers. None of these guys were members of the Nazi Party. Almost all of them had families. So they're well-established older men, and they were sent into Poland to police the local area, but they also assisted in the genocide of the Jewish people who lived in Poland. And at the start of the book, when this happens, they are completely sickened by what they're doing. They get physically ill. At the end of the book, they're hardened killers who would take pregnant women into the field in the middle of the night and shoot them in the back of the head without feeling anything. And the author of the book places them in three groups. There was the biggest group, about 70%, who didn't want to do it, but they did it for various reasons. I was told to do it, or if I don't do it, my friend has to do it, or we have to do it anyway. And then there were about 25% who actually enjoyed it. And then there was the last 5% who refused. Like, there's no way they're doing it. That what's wrong is wrong. I'm not doing it no matter what you do to me. And the author of the book is not a historian. It's a psychologist himself. The hypothesis, or the theory that he had, was that most people would do the exact same thing. If you or I, we were placed in that position, we would probably do the exact same thing. We would murder them as well. It takes an extraordinarily strong person to say no to that kind of pressure. And when I first read the book, I think it was 2019, I thought to myself, I'm not too sure if that's true. 2 years later, I'm entirely 100% convinced, especially what happened during lockdowns, people coming down hard on their neighbors for not wanting to wear a mask, or not making a different medical decision from them. Think about it. Luckily I was not here for stage 5 lockdown, which I'm very lucky that I didn't get to experience that. But I don't know what it was like in the townships, but in the more affluent neighborhoods, people would literally call the police on their neighbors if they saw them outside. I mean, you will remember. Do you know the name Colin Scorza by any chance?
No, I don't, brother.
See, that makes me so angry. Not at you, angry at South African media. But if I ask you, do you know who George Floyd is? I bet your ass you'd say, yes, well, I know who that is.
For sure I do.
Colin Scorza was a black man. I think it was in Alexandria. I might be wrong about where exactly it was. He was beaten to death by the South African National Defence Force for sharing a beer with his neighbor in his own backyard, a beer that he had bought himself from before lockdown. His neighbor was on his side of the fence. He was on his side. He literally gave his neighbor a beer. Somebody saw it. Somebody phoned the police. The army showed up and they beat him to death in his own backyard. Silence. Nobody knows about it. So yeah, not to get off on a whole COVID lockdown tangent, but to sum it up, those three: Viktor Frankl, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and No Ordinary Men.
Look, man, I love the first book that you reviewed that talks about locus of control. That discovering like locus of control and how can you like position yourself into it, it really helped me out. I think when I discovered it, I was just doing I think I was doing my grade 12, but it was an interesting study to go through. And the one where you say, what if the one that you talk about taking responsibility on everything, like saying something is your fault, say you got into an accident, what's your contribution towards that? That principle of saying everything that happens in my life is my fault is the principle that I'm struggling. I am boxing so much with this principle to adapt. I want to adapt it because I had my mentor saying, once you tell yourself that everything that happens is your fault, that your life will change tremendously. And I think from the small pieces of executing that, like the code of the principle, I can see some progress. You know, I can see some progress. There's one thing that you said when we met that I guess this is going to like a communal mindset or environmental mindset. Where you said to me, many people have really victimized themselves in situations. They have concluded that they are victims. Like, how do you get to that point? Was it the discovery was it from the discovery of the books that you have made, or you have a different approach to the analysis of that?
A large part of it was the books that I've read, and I would encourage everybody to look up Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. He is a professor of psychology. He used to be at the University of Toronto, but he's left now. He has his own podcast, own YouTube channel. He was a big part of it as well, and the realization that universities at this point are very much teaching students to be victims. Now, sometimes you will be a victim, yes. Do not get me wrong. Life, if there's one thing that's sure in life, is that you will suffer at some point. At some point, life is going to smack the living daylights out of you. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. It happens to everybody. But what you do afterwards, that's up to you. You know, the difference between a victim and a victor is a victor looks at what's happened to them and thinks, how can I overcome this? How can I get through this? Whereas someone who has a victim mentality will always look for a reason to be oppressed. And unfortunately, I see this coming into South Africa more and more. It's coming from the United States, and it makes no sense in a South African context, especially considering our history, our history of overcoming and strife and all that. But you look for reasons to be oppressed. You know, we call it the oppression Olympics. You know, poor me, look at me. I'm so. I'll come back. Before the show, we talked about that friend of mine who dated a Canadian girl, and I got so angry at her at one point. In fact, she was a white supremacist. Because in her experience, in her world, coming from Canada, she believed that just because you have white skin, you automatically have an easy life, you automatically have money, you automatically went to university. And, especially with my background, the reason why I got to university is I worked my butt off. I had to go there on scholarships. I couldn't afford to do it by myself or have my mom pay for it. So she had this thing of, we have to help Black people because, poor Black people are so oppressed and they've got such a poor background and, all that. And I'm like, how does that make sense? Some of the most dynamic, wonderful, and rich individuals I've met in my life have been very Black and very proud of that fact, very African. One of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life was a student living in Korea. He was studying nuclear physics, and he was studying it in Korea because he got a scholarship from he came from Ghana. He was the top student in the entire Ghana, in the entire country, and that's why they offered him a scholarship. So he was living there, and I'm like, should I just look down on him? Should he be a victim and go, woe is me, I can never get anywhere in life because my skin is slightly darker than everybody else's? So universities have done that to a large degree. Of people, as I say, people victimize themselves. They look for reasons why they cannot succeed. They think, I can't do it because of this and this. They just see the obstacles in their way instead of seeing the opportunities. And if that really was true, I think it was last year, one of the top matriculants I think he got 10. It was either 8 or 10 distinctions. That was a guy who grew up in a shack and had to study by candlelight. Poorest of poor, went to a very poor school. That's someone who's decided, I'm going to be a victor.
I see. And now I want us to conclude this section of mindset with 2 questions, or 3 maybe. Tell me about some of the best principles that you discovered from your body transformation, moving from 135 kg unhealthy body to being an extremely athlete. What are some of the principles that you learned from it? Because you said it threatened your life, Yeah,
it did. I'll tell you what happened, and that's that. I'm actually really glad you brought that up because that is a very good example that I can show the victim versus victor mentality. Right. So after I stopped playing rugby, if I played loose head prop, if you could believe that or not. Now, if you're not familiar with rugby positions, Beesten Tawarira, Osdurant, Oxenche, those are your big guys, So of course you have to eat more.
I'm not even familiar, but it's fine.
It's your big guys. They're really the big ones. Number one, they'll get the front row and the scrum. I was a little too short to continue playing lock, so they decided to turn me into a prop, which meant I had to eat an inordinate amount of calories every single day. So after I stopped playing rugby, unfortunately, it did not change my eating habits. If you remember, I said I was in a pretty dark place. And as a result, I got pretty fat. Then in 2019, late 2018, beginning 2019, I developed some really bad neck problems. I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't go anywhere. My mindset the whole time, I would just be thinking, my neck, this hurts. And I tried so many things. Nothing would work. Physiotherapy, acupuncture, massages, different pillows, stretches, trying to strengthen the back. Nothing would help. I eventually ended up at a spine hospital in Korea. Usually the people who go there have been involved in car accidents and things like that. And one thing I really appreciate about Korean people is they can be quite blunt and quite honest. And after nothing had worked, the doctor finally sent me for an MRI. MRI came back, there's nothing wrong with my neck. And he just looked at me and he said, you know what I think it is? I think you're too fat. You need to make a plan. See if you can lose some weight. And at that point, I realized, yeah, he's right. Why do I look the way that I look? This is not healthy. I don't like it. And I decided to start losing weight and start doing things. And about when was it? It was in end of July 2020. So at this point, I dropped 20 kilograms already, and I was pretty fit. I was making really good progress. The Wednesday morning, I woke up and I got extreme heartburn. Like I've never felt before in my entire life. And I thought it would go away, but it didn't. Went to sleep that night, woke up, my arms were hurting. Which if I'd known anything about heart problems, I would probably have been, alarm bells would have been ringing, but I didn't. So about it, I didn't go to the doctor or anything like that. That Friday, as I was at work, I suddenly broke out in cold sweat, felt something was very wrong, started getting heart palpitations, massive headache, and it felt like something was pressing on my chest. So I told my boss, listen, I've got to go get to a doctor. So I drove to my house doctor, who was also a friend. He did an EKG, and he immediately told me something's very wrong. You need to get to an emergency room. Drove to the emergency room, walked into the emergency room. At first, they didn't want to help me because you're walking. How bad could it be? But when the EKG came back, they decided to do a blood test. And when the blood test came back, they realized something was very wrong. I was wheeled into what they call an intervention room, and they did an emergency procedure on me where I don't know, you're probably not going to be able to see, but there's a little scar there. They make a deep cut into your vein. They insert a tube there, and they pump a contrast dye through your artery, and they put an X-ray machine on your chest so that they can see the images. And that's when they discovered that I had my right coronary artery was completely blocked. I was in the process of having a massive heart attack. The doctor told me straight up, if you had waited an hour later, you would have been dead.
Yeah.
But the fact that I was so fit and had lost so much weight already, he told me saved my life. After the heart attack, my heart's completely normal. I have no scarring tissue. To give you an idea, the most that your heart can function is about 70% pumping power. If it goes over 70, it means you've got an enlarged heart muscle and your heart is pumping out more blood than it can get in. But as long as it's the closer you get to the 70 without going over, that means your heart's really healthy. After the heart attack, my heart, most people, their heart capacity is about 40 or 50%. Mine is at 60 because of how
I will have to check mine. I've never had a scan of that.
No, I definitely recommend you make sure everything's fine. But that's my point. After that heart attack happened, I could very easily have said, oh, woe is me. Why on earth did this happen to me? And the reason why it happened, they're still not sure exactly what caused it. It's congenital. At this point, it's one of the reasons why I exercise as hard as I do. But I look at it as that's another thing to motivate me to keep on being fit, to keep on exercising. Especially now when I've got a newborn, things are a bit hectic. My wife knows that I'm willing to compromise on every single other hobby, every other thing that I do, but that one we cannot skip. I have to stay fit. So that's a good example of choosing not to be the victim.
Yeah, and what do you say to yourself when you have to go to the gym or maybe to start gymming? What do you say to yourself when your mind is like, hey man, today you're so tired. I don't think you just skip for a day, or like when the mind make that a valid excuse. I guess as an athlete what it would bring on.
Well, that kind of mindset, the mindset to train like that doesn't just happen. It's a habit you've got to cultivate. So what I would say to somebody is, and this is where people make such big mistakes. They decide to eat as much as possible. If I can use that analogy, it's that old saying of how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time. Don't start, oh, I'm going to work out 6 days a week, 2 hours a day, and I'm only going to eat 1,000 calories every day. If you do that, you're going to crash and burn inside 2 weeks. At this point, I can't stop exercising any more than I could stop going to the bathroom or brushing my teeth. It's a habit. It's every single day at the exact same time. That's what I would say to people is start forming a healthy habit. If that means doing 10 push-ups a day at the start or walking for 20 minutes, that's fine. That's how you start. And then from there, as soon as you're comfortable with that, you can build it bigger and bigger and make it your own little habit. So I often have days where it's like, man, I do not want to work out. I am tired. I just want to sit on my behind. But because it is a habit, I've got that time every day. My wife will ask me as well, aren't you going to go train? Yeah, I got to go.
I like that. I like that. That's so fascinating, man. Yeah, I like that when your loved ones always call you to actually reminder of what you're supposed to do and find out that which you're supposed to do is so important to you as well. I really love that. The last question on this section now is like saying like you said that you've noticed at a very young age that you were gifted with intellectual curiosity, started reading at did you say at 4, right? Mm-hmm. Started reading at age 4. Having gone through all the experiences and the challenges of acquiring knowledge and achieving goals, or all that, having gone through all that, would you friendly make maybe say a formula or just a systematic statement that if one is below average, say maybe he's 30% smart, how would you move that particular person from that state of maybe 30% smart or 30% intelligent, or maybe how do you move a person below the average point to an extremely excelling point, or maybe 75% of intelligence, or maybe curiosity, or maybe good state of life? Do you have any things that you can just combine to make that sentence or paragraph?
Well, unfortunately, IQ is pretty much set. If you're born with an extremely low IQ, the chances of you becoming a genius, it's impossible. It's not going to happen. However, that being said, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump.
Oh, I'm not into so movies. Can you believe that I firstly watched The Matrix this year? I think 3 months back. Do you know The Matrix?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that shows that I'm not into movies. Imagine a 2000 movie, I'm only watching it now. So I just watched like The Pursuit of Happiness, I think 3 days ago. And I think that movie has been there, really into movies. But I just watch movies that are teaching something. Like The Matrix, I went there because I discovered that it was a documentary and all that. And Pursuit of Happiness, I went there because one of my clients was like, you gotta watch that movie. It got some work ethic lessons and all that. So I only go into movie based on referrals. Like the movie, some of the movies that you have mentioned here, I'm gonna watch them.
So Pursuit of Happiness, perfect example of someone with an internal locus of controls. I mean, Chris Gardner could have very easily have gone, everything is against me. Society, my wife left me. Society is against me. I'm just kidding.
Hey man,
So okay, well, in Forrest Gump is the story of an individual who's a little bit more low IQ, but he ends up becoming this incredibly successful man. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture. actually beat a movie that I think is even better, called The Shawshank Redemption, which, funny enough, is also about a man with an internal locus of controls who ends up going to jail for the murder of his wife and her boyfriend, which he was framed for. Definitely highly recommend you watch that. But in Forrest Gump, there's something his mom tells him from a very young age. Stupid is what stupid does. Some of the most intelligent people I've ever seen in my life are some of the dumbest people I've seen in my life. To get back to what universities are teaching people and how they're messing up young people. I mean, university professors are incredibly smart, yet they're falling for this neo-Marxist indoctrination that puts everybody in classes of oppressed versus oppressor, and puts you on a little pyramid where the most oppressed people should receive the most help. For example, if you went right now and went to Yale University and started asking professors, what is a woman? A lot of them would not even be able to answer you. Where if you go and ask Joe Schmo on the street who works as a mechanic and you ask him, what is a woman? He's going to go, like, what do you mean, what's a woman is a woman? It's a woman. It's someone who can have babies, Everybody knows what a woman is. Yet these intelligent people can't answer it. So yeah, stupid is what stupid does. If you waste your time doing stupid things, you're going to be stupid. What do I mean by doing stupid things? Well, TikTok, for example, big example. TikTok is wreaking havoc right now on young people, specifically by rewiring their brains to only think in little 5-second excrements. There's studies being done now that people who are addicted to TikTok have attention spans the size of a goldfish. And that's really bad, right?
Really?
You can, if you want to see how bad. Okay, never mind the privacy issues. Like if you sign up to TikTok, I dare you to go look at what you're signing up exactly. That thing's scanning your phone, taking pictures of your surroundings, reading your messages, and feeding all that back to the Chinese government, which, not a conspiracy, by the way. You can check this out. It's really not that difficult to find. Again, just go look at that little, what exactly you're signing when you're, what exactly you're signing when you sign up. But if you want to see how bad this is, create a TikTok profile, pretend like you're a 13-year-old boy or girl, and just watch what the feed suggests to you. Just keep on watching what they suggest to you and see how quickly you absolute depravity. People doing the most deranged, idiotic things you can think of, eating themselves to death, young girls dancing provocatively like they're strippers, crawling around like dogs, degrading themselves, pretending that they're animals, and not in a, oh, we're playing kind of way, like, oh, I actually believe I'm a wolf, or creating all sorts. One of the latest TikTok trends was creating psychological problems for yourself, which, just a little tangent off, which is the complete opposite. If you look at what the algorithm suggests in China, it suggests things that promote responsibility, working hard, studying, everyday heroes, and especially being a soldier, fighting for your country, things like that. So it promotes this very wholesome, uplifting image, but in the rest of the world, it's breaking us down, making us more depraved. So things like that, or sitting on your butt all day eating junk food, using all your free money to drink alcohol because you don't want to deal with what's going on in your life. If you do stupid things like that, your life is going to be stupid. I'm sorry I'm not saying you can't have fun every now and again, but everything has balance, So my advice to someone like that is very simple. Stop doing stupid things. Start chasing excellence. And again, we come back to the analogy of eating the elephant one bite at a time. If and I'm going to quote Dr. Jordan Peterson here. If your life is such a mess that right now you have no idea where to start with the smallest thing that you can do right now. Go clean up your room. Tomorrow, do something else. And build up. Go a little bit bigger each time. If you do that every single day, your life will get exponentially better because you're starting to cultivate good habits. When I started exercising again after my heart attack, I had to start from scratch. I lived on the 11th floor in an apartment. I literally started on taking the lift down, climbing one flight of stairs, taking the lift back up. The next day, taking the lift down, taking 2 flights of stairs. I only started doing other exercises when I could climb all 11 flights in one go without getting out of breath. That's when I realized, okay, now I can start. So I had to do all that again. If I had just straight up started exercising again, I probably would have collapsed and damaged my heart. So it's the same thing. Start small. See what you can improve in your life. And just a word of warning. The people around you don't always want what's best for you. Even family members. Because let's take the example of quitting smoking. You've got a friend who smokes and you're like, no, thank you. I'm going to quit. Oftentimes they go, come on, don't be stupid. Here's one. Because you doing something good reflects badly on them. They immediately start thinking, what am I doing with my life? And they don't like it. So they'll try to. Have you ever heard of a crab in a bucket analogy?
The what?
Crabs in a bucket analogy.
No. I've never heard of that.
Well,
you're dropping knowledge, man.
If you catch crabs and you put them in a bucket, you don't need to put a lid on the bucket because as soon as one of them starts to climb out, the other crabs will pull him back down again.
Yeah.
Bananas, the sprinkler would start. Yes, I've seen that study. It's the exact same thing. So you have to make some tough choices in your life as well. Who do you surround yourself with? Me personally, I would much rather, and this I'm a little bit unique, I would much rather be on my own than surrounded by crappy friends who are just trying to pull me down. Unfortunately, family members can do that as well. It's very sad, but here's one way that you can see if somebody is a true friend. How do they react when you tell them something bad happened to you? Do they try to one-up you and go, oh, you think that's bad? Wait until you heard what happened to me. And the same with good news. If you tell them good news, are they genuinely happy for you? Or do they try to bring the attention back to them as well? That's a fairly easy way to determine if someone's a good friend or not. Yeah.
Hey man, on the last question, all the things that you dropped, I aggressively endorse them. Like I give 100% on them. Speaking of, if your environment, it's bad to an extent that you not become progressive, then you rather be alone, no matter how much painful it is, but just be alone. I was telling a friend of mine that last time I was somewhere, we're having that conversations that funny things when I do startups, when I do business organizations and stuff, people that visit those like organizations are strangers. I never see my friends there, and I always spend time with these friends of mine, but I never see them on the things that I am pulling up, So I like that, number one. And saying again, you like the people around you might affect you, even the ones that you call loved ones, the ones that they always like they want the best for you. I want to trace this with the reference at the beginning of the year. So I find myself in a situation where my insurance policies are actually lapsing. I'm not getting any funds. Like I have no money. I just see the money going out, So I'm sitting alone at this time, and I'm like, And where I'm based, I'm actually based in the township, and I'm like to myself, what would it take? So what would it take for me to move from this point at least to a better point where I can afford my policies, you know? And the only thing that was available at that moment was to go to the city, which is where I'm at right now, where we met, right? Was to go there. But when I started, it didn't start there. It started with me being homeless. You know, have to sleep in the library and make cash. And because when you run businesses in the township, sometimes you don't have like a profit maximization levels because of the people, because of the standard of living. So I had to come to the city, and from there I started having more clients. I started making like proper. I revamped all the things that were falling at that moment. But here's the thing, where your words get into, even your loved ones sometimes cannot be in your best interest as far as progressing or moving from a bad point to another point. Here's your reference of words. My mother, when I told her that, hey, I left, she said, where are you gonna sleep? I'm like, I'm sleeping in the car. She was like, you have the bed, you have bad food at home. Why don't you come home? Why are you torturing yourself? Even like close friends of mine, they're like, this life that you're living, it's a torture. And I told myself, I already made my mind that I'm gonna live this life for certain months, and after this, I'm done. I'm gonna find an apartment. I'm gonna, try to sleep in an appropriate place. I lost weight. Right now, I just gained weight. So it is that thing. Had I listened to my mother or to my friend Uguchi, hey, stop torturing yourself, I was gonna remain broke. I was not gonna get some opportunities that I have at this moment. I was not gonna have like the resilience, because that taught me resilience. Brother, to know that when you have to sleep, you're not going into the same room that is full of comfort, but you're just going in a cold place. That teaches you resilience. So I really love some of the things that you just said recently, because I can deeply resonate with them. And now let's get to another point. I don't know if you want to make comments on that, but if you don't mind, we can move on.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, that's coming back to the infantilization of young men. Well, just stay with mom. Stay a teenager. Stay not taking any responsibility for yourself. That, and I want to commend you for taking that step. That must have been very scary, but you did it, and now your life has changed. And again, to why I said this Western wokeness that's infiltrating universities, big reason why I don't believe it makes no sense in a South African context is we are a nation of overcomers. We're so many different groups of people with so many different languages, but we're tough. My goodness, we're tough. I mean, right now, I remember the first time load shedding happened, and I'm not that old, but right now we've got high school students who've never lived in a country without load shedding. And every single day, it seems to me, I'm very involved with civil organizations that resist the government and try to push back. And especially this year, it seems to be like every single day, the government's trying something new to make us all miserable. And just like South Africans just keep on going, keep on running, keep on grafting in some way or the other, keep on staying alive. I mean, you just have to walk down a township to see the entrepreneurs doing their thing, to realize that South Africa is not a nation of victims. We're a nation of overcomers. There's a Afrikaans saying that's very pertinent. A boer maak 'n plan. Exactly. We were raised with that. You don't just sit and cry, you make a plan. And the big problem with the victim mentality is it teaches you to just be weak and blame all the people who are making your life miserable, instead of trying to get yourself out of that situation and overcome it and become stronger.
I like that. And the other thing that I think I missed out was you talking about TikTok. I was called to give a session to kids about mindset, right? So this lady who organized this whole session, at the end of the session, she was like saying the same thing, that, hey, it's sad. I wish so many people can hear such conversations, because it's sad in our living years where adults are striving to be kids. And that changed the whole development of life, because of life at this moment, because we're looking up to our adults, we're looking at them setting the pace. But I'm telling you, man, in our living years, it's a different thing. We want to be we just, right now, we look in ourselves. Like right now, I don't believe in political liberation, but I believe in business liberation. Business leaders, I believe these are the people that can liberate us, because they solve more concrete problems at first hand. They manage people, they know the importance of people, because those people are gonna bring profits, and those people are gonna enhance their organizations or the entity. So I believe into that. But looking at where we are right now, we have expectations that older people are gonna rescue us at some point. Like you said, it's been 30 years, but no difference. So that thing that lady said, that we're living in times where old people are striving to be young people so badly. Look, you see them on TikTok. I guess that's what you were referring to. So that as well, that just stood out for me. It's a remarkable point. Let's get into beliefs. Now, these two remaining topics, they won't be long, because I believe there's no okay, we just take them as they come. So beliefs, when I met you, I was telling you about this. One of the things that I used to believe that maybe getting better in life, or becoming or being at a very better position of life, maybe where you prefer, was the matter of luck. It will just happen, just stay existing. But I got to be exposed into different beliefs that people have, which help them to win. Some lose because of the beliefs that they have. And Dr. Bruce Lee Limpton talks about this. Some people are not. He's saying, and I want your view on this thing. He's saying some people, if they stay as they are, they don't add anything in their current state. They don't learn, they don't experience, they don't do any. They will be subjected to the things that their predecessors were subjected to. Meaning, if your mother was not rich, or if your mother was poor, if you're not doing anything about that, you just live organically, you will find yourself subjected to the same state your parents were subjected to. And he calls that genetic control, that you're controlled by the genes that you have inherited. And he's saying, on the other side, there are people that will change drastically. You cannot reference back into their lives of what they have become today, because of epigenetics, which is the influence of environment. He's making a point that people become the environment that they spend time into. It's just a belief that I have adopted. And of course, I'm trying to find my way on this. What's your take on this?
I would say I'm fully in agreement with him. To come back about what you said about luck, there's a very old saying, luck favors the prepared. The best example I can use is right now. So my wife and I, we have our own business, and we're aggressively expanding at this point. Like, we're looking for, we have a couple of part-time employees. We're looking for our first full-time employee. And what we do, like when we went to South Korea to teach English, And when we decided we're coming back to South Africa, I fully expected I would be working at a local high school again. However, we were very lucky because we got an opportunity to open an online branch of the company that we had been working for in South Korea. It's a massive franchise of schools, but they all do in-person schools, where ours is completely an online, business. Now that would look, to someone who's outside, it's like, oh my goodness, wow, you just got this massive opportunity and it just fell into your lap. But that ignores the years of hard work, how we became an integral part of the company we worked for, to such an extent that when we left, they said, we don't want to lose these people. We want to keep them in our fold, where before I was just an employee, now I'm the director of of my own little business. So yeah, I agree with that. Looking at the way I grew up, it would have been very easy for me to get involved with drugs, underage drinking, maybe get a girl pregnant out of wedlock, which actually that happened to a friend of mine. His first kid is about to go to high school. He got a teenage girl pregnant, and his life has been very hard since then. To his credit, I will say he married her. He's still married to her. He took complete responsibility for the mess that he made. But that my life could so easily have gone that way. Growing up poor. But I didn't, and I really have to give credit to my mom in this sense, because she always raised me with this mindset of this you're gonna love this. Poor is a statement of mind. Broke is a financial reality. We are broke. We're not poor. And it's very similar to, do you know who Dave Chappelle is?
Yeah.
Right? Now, to anyone who might not know Dave Chappelle's story, he had his own show on Comedy Central, and he walked away from $20 million because he didn't want to be beholden to another company, or to an outside force. He wanted to be his own man, and he's right now is one of the most successful comedians in the world. I absolutely love to watch him. And he grew up with a very similar mindset as well, where his father raised him that at this moment we are broke, but we're not poor. Because if you start to get the mentality of being poor, you might never be able to escape it. Yeah. So, I largely agree with the doctor you were quoting. It's either you either fall victim to the exact same things that caught your parents and you never move on, or you decide to break free and chart your own path.
And now, tell me, this is a broad question, right? Now, when you look back, what are some of few beliefs that you were taught to have, that you realized that I've actually been fed a lie? This is not so accurate after all. What are some of the beliefs that you really got to a point that this is not true? I was actually not. It was not good of me to believe this was true.
Okay, this one's going to be a little bit difficult to answer, because I never want to break people down. I always want to lift people up, and there are a few things that I'm very cynical about, but I don't want to share those cynical views with people, because if you believe that and you find comfort in that, I don't want to destroy that for you, because in this way I'm a little bit miserable, and a lot of it has to do with religious beliefs and growing up, what I was taught about God and things like that. And I want to make it clear, I'm not an atheist or an agnostic by any stretch of the imagination. It's just the trust I have in higher powers is somewhat less than it used to be. But if a person finds comfort in God, or I don't want to be the person to go, oh, you're wrong, because sometimes feeling like you're alone and you have to do everything yourself, it can be a miserable place. Another lie that I think we all grew up with is very much the lie of the Rainbow Nation. That we're this dynamic group of people that are going to come together. We're going to live in eternal harmony, and the streets of Johannesburg will flow with gold as we wave flags. And, I grew up in the 90s. That's very much the image I got. And you said something earlier about you don't believe in political liberation. I'm completely the same way. The government cannot save anybody. The government cannot. If you want to make a problem 10 times worse, involve the government. Bring in the civil service. They will mess it up. This should scare the living daylights out of everybody, right? The ANC wanting to bring in national health insurance. Right? And you go, oh, but some people don't have access to healthcare, and I completely agree. That's horrible. But do you want the people that are in charge of driver's licenses, the post office, Eskom? Do you want those people to be in charge of your healthcare? When like what happened to me when I had a heart attack, have someone go, oh, please sit in a line. We will help you when we get there. That should scare the living daylights out of everybody. So I completely agree. It will be business liberation. It will be civil organizations, that free South Africa, not the government, because the government cannot create anything. The government cannot create wealth. They can just steal wealth. It can just tax us more. And just to give everybody an idea, did you know that South Africa is one of the highest taxed nations in the world?
I think I had a sense of that, but I wasn't so sure. But I thought it was like all of us in the world.
Do you know what the tax rate in South Korea is?
Tell me, man.
3.3%. 3.3% income tax.
What's that? Is that value-added tax?
No. That's I think value-added tax is 10%. No, income tax 3.3%. To give you an idea, I think the entry level in South Africa is 12%. Like that's the bare minimum. And of course, the more you earn, the higher that tax bracket gets, until it tops out at around 45 to 50%. Like half your paycheck, just like that, to the government. And Korea is a country that has excellent healthcare. All the roads are in good repair. There's no electricity cuts. Everything's really clean. Everything works. I didn't mind paying taxes there. I hate paying taxes in South Africa because nothing works. So government, as I said, the government cannot create value. It can just steal value. And then if I can quote, was it Ronald Reagan? The scariest sentence in English is this one: I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah. That's the scariest statement in English.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I agree with you. It will be business liberation. It will be people, creating more jobs, and businesses can create jobs. Governments can't create jobs. Governments can only make it more or less difficult. The only job a government can create is the civil service, and unfortunately, South Africa's civil service is incredibly bloated.
Speaking of tax, and how ridiculous tax rates are in South Africa, I thought maybe it's around, like it's all over the world. I got a chance to learn about tax history, as far as I did commercial studies, but this was not included on the package of on the lectures package. So the history of tax goes like, tax was never meant to hit poor and middle class like this. It was meant for rich people, right? And that system of taxing rich people to support poor and middle class was well organized. But what happened is, but when people, of course, make a review on this history, they always like look at the smartness of rich people or wealthy people. But I look at the I mean, I don't want to say stupidity, but the flawness of those who were in leadership at that time. So what happened is they couldn't win the battle between them and rich people. So rich people always have strategies of fighting what's not favoring their money and their wealth and their cash flows and stuff. So they came with a strategy that was taking those tax rates into black and poor people. But what happened is those who were in government at that time, they were so greedy that they got to a point that they couldn't tax rich people as according to their plan, but they ended up taxing poor and the middle class. So this is how this thing would look like. That the plan that they have, they would tax wealthy people and takes the revenue and take that revenue and cascade it to middle class and poor. So what happened is rich, after they have seen that move, they brought their moves, and government saw that it's now hard to tax rich people because of some of the ways that they came with. Before they would maintain their wealth in their names, but after that, one of the moves that they took was to open a corporate and take all their assets and put it on the corporate, because corporate is a juristic person, therefore is governed by different by different laws. There are laws that don't affect the rich person themselves. So that, like, some of the rules was like liability is limited. Liability is limited. If you own a company and you get in trouble individually, that will not pass to your company because you have a limited liability. We cannot take the properties, assets of your company because of the laws that govern business. So they couldn't fight such things by creating like new laws to fight that war. So what they ended up doing, they were just like, now we're gonna have to go to the poor and middle class, because the government was no longer having money, because by the nature, like, the organization that was meant to lead people did not depend on people to pay in order to lead them. That's why I believe to be a leader doesn't need money, but it just needs your mind to create schemes, So they couldn't, what they did, they collapsed all the things that they found there. But this conversation, I would like to phrase it with this statement, or to decorate it with this statement. With everything that is bad today that you see, it was once good, So the thing of government leading people, whether it's through politics or business, it was once good because people that started it were creative enough to see that we don't have to tax people to fund government expenditures. Tax was only meant when there was war, that as a group, let's collaborate so that we can bring best of our abilities on this war. It was an occasional thing. It was not a monthly thing that we see on our salaries, on our businesses. It was, but it goes a long way. So I just want to get to the point that I think I understand what you mean when you say tax in South Africa is ridiculous. I want to believe that the ridiculousness has something to do with the mind of those in power. Man, let's get into. Okay, you want to say something?
Yeah, just quickly.
Yeah.
Tax in South Africa is ridiculous because you pay twice for everything. You pay tax for state hospitals, but you have to pay for healthcare, private healthcare. You pay tax for the police, but you need to pay for your own security company, right? You pay tax to maintain the roads, but then you need to buy a new car because your car's messed up because there are potholes all over. You end up paying twice for everything. That's my big problem with tax in South Africa. And you are right. If anything, if lockdowns across the West and South Africa as well have shown us anything, is that our political class are so removed from the man at street that go back to, I don't know if you saw the video a few months ago where I think it was Action SA. A representative from Action SA stood up to speak on behalf of the community where a couple of young kids had been murdered. And the Minister of Police, Bekitele, started shouting at him, "Shut up, shut up." If you haven't seen it, just YouTube Bekitele shut up and you'll find the clip. Bekitele is supposed to be a servant of the South African people. He's not our king. He's not over us. He's supposed to be a servant. But our political class believes that they are outside our purview. We are their servants. And a big part of that, the reason why they think that is because people have, and I can understand this. I mean, we've got so many struggles going on in our lives, so many things going on, but we don't take the time to hold our political leaders to account anymore. And that doesn't just mean voting. Before, when I said I'm part of some civil organizations, the biggest one that I would encourage people to look out for is something called Dear SA, Dear South Africa. Dear South Africa is a participation platform. You'll find them on YouTube, Telegram. They have their own website as well. But every time the South African government puts forth a bill, Dear South Africa allows you the chance to have your say on that bill. And they've been extraordinarily effective in curbing some of the worst excesses of the South African government. For example, the latest one that they got to turn around was about 2 weeks ago, when a new bill came out that ministers of parliament would no longer have to pay for their own water and electricity. They would get them for free. Dear SA immediately launched a campaign. The amount of people that commented on it with such negative vigor immediately made the government do an about face. So yeah, I would encourage everyone, take a look, Google Dear SA, find out on their platform, sign up to get their newsletter. If you're on Telegram, you can join their group, and that way you can hold your government responsible. It takes 5 minutes to fill in a little quote, or fill in a little comment whether you support something or you're against it. Another one that's going through right now is the Basic Education Law Amendment Bill, which would make it illegal to homeschool your children, amongst other things. Yeah. They're pushing back against that as well. Yeah.
All right, thank you about that. And we're now heading to a conclusion of our conversation. It's so unfortunate that we're gonna have the short segment of this part. I want to question you about money, acumen of money. What is what are some of the best principles that you have learned around money?
Same.
Right.
That's the biggest one. Between 5 and 10% of your salary needs to go towards your savings, and that needs to be one of the first things that you do. Savings is not the amount of money you have left over at the end of the month. As soon as you get that money in your bank account, between 5 and 10%, you need to put it somewhere else. That's the biggest thing that I learned, and it's one of the reasons why I was able to move abroad and go and work abroad and come back with the money needed to set up a business on this side.
Yeah, there's every time when we talk about saving, there's always that that challenging conversations that would challenge the statement that saving is actually competing against inflation. What do you have, what are some of our advices you have around having saving but still having your money not so valueless as much as it's a depreciating asset?
Yeah, look for eternal assets that you can, and unfortunately eternal assets are a little bit more pricey. I'm a big investor, a proponent of investing in gold, physical gold, not gold shares.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've dabbled a little bit in playing the crypto market, but that one I would say that's a big risk to take. You need to know when to enter and when to get out. But yeah, inflation is a bitch. I'm not going to argue that. That's inflation is a bitch. But I would my last little bit of advice: use credit wisely. Okay?
How do you do that?
Never ever pay with your credit card what you will not be able to afford to pay for real next month. Obviously you need to use credit to build up a credit score, but the problem most people have is that it comes back to self-discipline is, ooh, my credit card says I've got 20,000 rand. That's how you enslave yourself to debt. And inflation wise, the bank's always going to get their money back. But yeah. So
like how would a short lesson about money sound like to your kids? How would you what would be that short lesson that you would give your kids?
The very first thing I would do, when my daughter is going to be older, and what I'm definitely going to do is I will give her a monthly allowance. However, just for example's sake, let's say it's 100 rand a month. I would take 10 of that 100 rand and put it somewhere else and let it build up over time until I eventually can take her to a toy store or somewhere fun and get her to buy herself something much bigger and more expensive than she would usually be able to get. That's exactly how my mom taught me how to save, and it had a huge effect on me. That where I started working my first part-time job, getting I think it was 2,000 rand a month, still being able to save despite just getting that little bit of money.
All right, brother. In closing, how would you like to be remembered by the world?
I think I would like to be remembered as someone who made circumstances around him better, not just for himself, but for other people. There's a quote I once heard in a movie. What kind of a man is a man who doesn't make the world better? That's the big legacy I would leave. I would like to leave the world a little bit better than when I came into it.
Speaking of that, I think I have something that justify like the efforts that you're taking to try making the world better. Let's talk about the opportunities that you have for South Africans. Earlier on when we met, you said South Africans, like young people with a degree, it doesn't matter what you qualified on, they can contact you. I'll put a poster on this session. They can contact you. What are some opportunities that you have for them?
Right. So I've made a lot of contacts with my time in South Korea, and I maintain a lot of them. And they are always looking for especially young people who are willing to teach, willing to have an adventure, willing to be open to different experiences. So they're always looking for people like that. And the salary is quite good. It's usually around about 25,000 rand. Plus an apartment, plus healthcare, plus an airplane ticket back, and there are other benefits as well. But if you have a degree, you have a passion for young people, you're more than welcome to send me an email to find out how to do this process. It's a little tricky, but I am more than willing to help you with the paperwork process because I get paid by the company in Korea to recruit people. So I help South Africans for free. That being said, I mentioned earlier that in my business, we're now looking for our first permanent additional teacher. So if you have a degree and you have a passion for young people, but you are not willing to leave the country, please feel free to send me an email as well. I'm sure you'll add my email address.
Yes.
Yeah, please feel free to send me an email, introduce yourself, and we'll see if we can find a place for you, either in my organization or in South Korea.
All right, brother. And people don't have to pay anything for these opportunities?
No,
Is there any corporate touch?
There is a little bit of financial implications involved, but not to me. You don't pay any money to me. When I say finances involved, I mean things like applying for a passport, paying to get your criminal background check evaluated, and then I think there's also a small admin fee after your visa has been processed at the embassy of South Korea. But you will never give me money. I don't want any money from you. Again, my fee is covered by the by the company in South Korea. So you don't pay me anything. It's not a. I think if somebody said, "Oh, you have to pay me," then my alarm bells would go off. Like, "Oh, this is a scam for sure." But you're not giving me any money whatsoever.
All right, thank you so much. And what are some of the things that are going through that maybe you would like to invite young people or people in general? Do you have any of the things that are going on right now that would benefit people, or you just like people to be there?
You mean in South Korea or in general?
In general, just in general.
All right, I would very much encourage people to take a look at Dear South Africa, the platform, and especially to people who, like yourself, who are internet savvy and who have family members and friends who are in townships who might not have access to the internet. Because the biggest weakness that the Dear South Africa platform has, and it's something we've talked about how we get around that, is the man who has a little chicken feet barbecue stand in the township has just as much a right to push back or comment on things that the government of South Africa is doing as the multimillionaire with his own company. But the problem is it's very difficult to deliver your comments if you don't have an internet presence. So what I would say to young people, a way you could make an absolute difference, this would be incredible, is if you familiarize yourself with the Dear South Africa platform, familiarize yourself with the campaigns that are going on. Like, for example, the firearms control bill that Becky Cele tried to bring in, where you will ban having handguns for self-defense, or the Basic Education Law Amendment Bill, which would take away a parent's right to homeschool their children, or it would severely lessen the power that the student governing body has over schools. Instead, it would put the government completely in charge of the schools. Things like familiarize yourself with that. Go to those people who don't have access to the internet, might not be aware of these things. Explain to them what's going on, get their comments, record their comments, and then by yourself add those comments later. Get their name, get their number, add those comments on the Dear South Africa platform. It really makes a massive difference. I would encourage you specifically, if you have Telegram, to join the Dear South Africa Telegram group. If you search just for Dear SA, you will immediately find the group and you'll be able to see which messages they send out. Just stay on there for a week and see how much more aware you are of what's going on with the government of South Africa, what they're trying to push through. Believe me when I say they are not our friends. They are trying to make our lives even more difficult than they already are. Because if our lives are as difficult as possible, we are concerned with what's going on in our own life. We're not concerned with what they're doing because we're too busy. So yeah, definitely do that. Join the platform. Start making people around you aware of what they can do, because it takes all of 5 minutes to fill in a little comment, and each comment can make a massive difference.
All right, brother. Think I'm losing you, but thank you. We are almost done. Thank you for respecting us with your presence. You just respected me with your presence. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And if you gonna need anything that has to do with young people, I think I have an audience of 1,000 1,900 young people. So of course you can just say it, and we can work together. And thank you so much. Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. And if at any point in the future you want to have me back, you have my number. You're more than welcome to invite me back. I'll be glad to give something back to the community.
Don't forget to follow and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's Asvaye on Facebook. Follow Asvaye and share the conversations. Question people about mentality.